Have you heard? There's a new guy in the company, not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, who actually stopped Mr. Miller's husband on the first floor last night. He insisted that he had to register him before letting him go upstairs. Can you believe that? The sense of ownership is strong with that one. Why does he care so much? The company isn't his. And get this, Mr. Miller came down to the 16th floor this morning. Why? Because he heard the guy who stopped his husband works there. Mr. Miller's reputation as a doting husband is officially cemented. How is that guy doing? Fired yet? I haven't heard anything yet. In his office, Frank Miller held a pen, sitting behind his executive desk in silence, lost in thought. He wasn't thinking about how to deal with the employee named Gus, who had caused the scene. He was thinking about himself. In theory, with so many departments in the company, the decision to retain an employee was usually made by the department head and human resources. There was no need for him to micromanage. But this time, he was fixated on it. Frank immediately felt that something was off with his own reaction. He asked himself rationally, did Gus do something wrong? Was it a work error? No. But he had embarrassed Nicholas. Frank sat up and pressed the intercom. Liam, come in. Okay, Mr. Miller. Liam walked into the office and stood before the executive desk. Frank thought for a moment and asked, if I wanted to fire an employee right now, what would the grounds usually be? Liam didn't even hesitate. Extremely poor performance, making low-level mistakes, little possibility of improvement, or a mistake of principle. What kind of low-level mistake? Or mistake of principle? Frank pressed. Liam paused, confused by the line of questioning. At work or outside of work? At work or outside, Frank said. Low-level mistakes at work involve ability, Liam explained. But outside of work, they involve character and morality. Character? Morality? So, did he think Gus's character was bad? That evening, back at home, Frank looked thoughtfully at Nicholas, who was sitting next to him on the sofa, soaking his feet in a warm basin. Nicholas was watching a TV series on his tablet, completely relaxed. Frank just stared at him. Sensing the gaze, Nicholas looked up from the tablet. What's wrong? Frank snapped out of his trance. Nothing. Later that night, Frank held Nicholas, who felt soft and warm in his arms. It dawned on him. He wasn't upset because of Gus. He was upset because of Nicholas. Because Nicholas had been embarrassed, Frank looked at Gus with particular displeasure. But hadn't he always distinguished between public and private affairs? Was this state of mind simply because they were married? No, that didn't feel right. Frank intuitively knew there must be something else. He targeted Gus because of Nicholas. Why? Because Nicholas was his partner. Just because Nicholas was his partner, Frank felt this protective urge? Frank tried to analyze it. If he eliminated Gus and only considered Nicholas, the logic held. Nicholas was his partner. But should he bring personal relationships into work? He shouldn't. It was just like when his brother, Marcus, quarreled with company executives. Frank wouldn't punish the executives just because Marcus was his brother. But now, he was hyper-focused on it. It was contradictory. Frank realized he had been doing a lot of things lately that defied his usual logic. He took Nicholas on business trips, thought about him during work, bought him gifts he might not need, asked Nicholas to send him meals, and had him stay in the office. All this, just because they were married? The next day in the office, Nicholas was sitting on the sofa reading the newspaper. Frank's eyes silently crossed the desk and landed on Nicholas's face. Because he is my partner? Frank asked himself. At home, Nicholas moved the guinea pig cage to the balcony, opened the door, and held the two guinea pigs, Romeo and Juliet, in his palm, letting them run around. He hummed while cleaning the sawdust, adding fresh food, and changing the water. Frank watched silently. Because he is my partner, Nicholas painted at home, curled up on the beanbag chair to nap, soaked up the sun, listened to music, cooked, and video chatted with friends. Frank watched it all. Because he is my partner, at night, they hugged and kissed. Frank held the warm, jade-like person in his arms, feeling that nothing was ever enough. Their chests touched, heartbeats synchronizing. Frank brushed away the hair sticking to Nicholas's forehead. Nicholas, he called in a low voice. Finally, he cleared the air and figured it out. It wasn't because Nicholas was his partner. It was because his partner was Nicholas. Soon, Charles received a particularly meaningful question from Frank via text. What is it like to like someone? Charles responded with a voice message, his tone amused. Brother, you asked the right person. Take me and my ex as an example. If you like him, it's basically self-destruction. Frank texted back. Speak carefully. Charles replied. Like, means breaking your own rules. You do things you wouldn't normally do because of a person, without even thinking about it. That is called liking. Whatever he wants, you give it to him hundreds of times. That is called liking. Even if he doesn't want something, you can't help but give it to him anyway. That is also called liking. Early the next morning, after Frank read Charles's reply, he lowered his head and kissed his sleeping partner on the cheek, lifted the quilt, and got out of bed. When Nicholas woke up, he assumed Frank had left long ago. He stretched and walked barefoot from the bedroom. Suddenly, he met Frank's gaze from the living room and paused. Nicholas blinked, looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 10 o'clock. You didn't go to work? Nicholas asked. Frank said nothing, looking at Nicholas deeply. What's wrong? Nicholas asked. Frank shook his head. He gestured to the table. Let's have breakfast. Oh. Nicholas walked to the table. You didn't go to work today? Isn't the company busy? Frank pulled out a chair. They sat across from each other. Nicholas ate breakfast while Frank watched him intently. Nicholas felt something was wrong. Eat, Frank said softly. Is the company busy today? Nicholas tried again. It's okay. Then are you going in later? Frank kept looking at him. We'll see. Nicholas thought for a while and suggested. If you don't go to the company this afternoon, let's go watch a movie together. Frank reached out and wiped a crumb from Nicholas's lip. What do you want to see? A new movie came out recently. I heard it's pretty good. Frank checked his watch. Then I won't go to the company this afternoon. Nicholas felt a little strange. Did Frank stay home to watch a movie with him? Or did he decide not to go because Nicholas suggested it? Are you really not busy today? Nicholas asked. Not busy, Frank lied. No matter how busy he wasn't busy today. Okay, let's go watch a movie, Nicholas said happily. Inside the cinema, Nicholas held a bucket of popcorn. Frank's gaze remained on Nicholas's face from the moment the lights went down. Coming out of the cinema, Nicholas was smiling. Frank looked at him with a smile on his own lips. What's wrong? Nicholas asked, touching his face. Is there something on my face? No. Frank reached out, took his hand, and led him out. It was still early, so they went to the mall. They passed a piano store and saw a grand piano at the entrance with the key cover lifted. Nicholas walked over and played a piece of Für Elise with one hand. After playing, he turned and smiled at Frank. Frank looked at him, mesmerized. In the afternoon, they went to the company together. As always, Nicholas wore headphones and watched TV series on Frank's tablet. Frank sat behind the executive desk, documents in hand, but his eyes kept drifting to Nicholas. Frank went to a meeting, checking his watch, remembering Nicholas hadn't eaten much. He planned to bring him a drink from the tea room later. At dinner time, Liam knocked on the door. What do you want to eat tonight? Liam asked. Liam looked at Frank. Frank looked at Nicholas. Liam followed his gaze to Nicholas. Let's order some Chinese food, Nicholas suggested. Okay, Liam nodded. Just as he was about to leave, Frank added, not too spicy. I know, Liam smiled. When they went home that night, they parked the car but didn't get out immediately. Things heated up in the front seat. No, go upstairs, Nicholas whispered, pushing him away gently. Frank kissed his forehead, the tip of his nose, his chin. Nicholas laughed. When they finally stumbled upstairs, clothes were scattered all over the floor. Frank realized something profound. He liked Nicholas. It turned out he already liked his partner. This was beyond his expectations. He had never believed in love at first sight and had a conservative attitude toward relationships. He had thought they would develop a stable, peaceful partnership. But now, Frank held Nicholas in his arms and felt the rapid beating of his heart. Frank consulted Charles again via text. What's the next step for me, Charles? Pursue. Wait, cancel that. Brother, you are a married man. What are you asking me for? Frank. Why can't I like him? What's the problem with liking my own husband? Charles. You like Nicholas. Really? Don't brag. Where in the world do so many good things happen to you alone? You married a good wife, and you actually like him? Huh. Frank. Yes, that's it. 5 minutes later, Charles sent a voice message. You must have saved the earth in your last life to have this kind of luck. Charles took time out of his busy schedule to meet Frank at a bar. Tell me, Charles said, taking a sip of wine. Why did you fall in love? I thought Nicholas was suitable, but not exactly a stunning beauty. Frank looked at Charles faintly. Not attractive? I mean, objectively. Charles corrected, clinking his glass against Frank's. How can you be so sensitive? Frank listed Nicholas's virtues rationally. Nicholas is from a good background, graduated from a prestigious school, has a good personality, can draw, play the piano, understands art, and has high emotional intelligence. He is more than just attractive. Okay, Charles sighed. Does your husband like you back? Charles raised his eyebrows and smiled. Is it unrequited? Frank frowned. Why are you laughing? I'm happy. I thought I was alone in the people you like don't like you camp, Charles laughed. Frank wanted to stuff the ice cubes from his glass into Charles's mouth. It's useless looking at me like that, Charles said. If you keep staring, your husband will still treat you as just a teammate. Teammate, that stung. But you are lucky, Charles patted Frank's shoulder. At least you have the chance to fall in love after marriage. Unlike me. Even if Miles doesn't like me, he still uses me as a boy toy. That night, Frank was working hard in bed, and for some reason, the words "if you don't like me, use me as a boy toy" echoed in his ears. Nicholas felt Frank stop and raised his neck in confusion. Frank met Nicholas's eyes and angrily yelled at Charles in his heart. You are the toy. The next night, Frank met Charles again. I was used as a toy again last night, Charles wailed, pretending to sob. Woohoo! Frank drank his wine in one gulp. We toys have dignity, Charles shouted. We must have a strategy. Attack the heart. What strategy? Frank asked. Shape the image, create romance, and give what they want, Charles advised. Frank accepted the suggestions of creating romance and giving what they want. Nicholas's birthday was coming up. How do you want to celebrate? Frank asked Nicholas. Usually, I'd have a meal with Miles, Nicholas said. I will accompany you this year, Frank said warmly. What do you want? Nicholas shook his head. I don't need anything. On his birthday, Frank took him to an art exhibition, then drove to the park. They arrived at a lakeside pier where a cruise ship waited, decorated with flower petals and lights. You booked a cruise? Nicholas asked, surprised. I think ordinary restaurants lack atmosphere, Frank said, leading him aboard. Do you like it? Yes, I like it, Nicholas smiled. Inside, the dining table was surrounded by a sea of flowers. Nicholas took photos, genuinely surprised. They ate a French dinner with wine, looking out at the city lights. I thought we'd eat casually, Nicholas said. I didn't expect it to be so romantic. Do you like it? I like it. Thank you. Frank felt satisfied. This was what liking someone felt like. Fear that you aren't doing enough, and fear that you are doing too much. Are we moving soon? Frank asked, trying to find a topic. Mid-May, Nicholas replied. Frank drank some wine, feeling awkward. He couldn't take his eyes off Nicholas. At 9 o'clock, fireworks exploded in the night sky. Look, fireworks. Nicholas pointed. Let's go to the deck, Frank said. They watched as the fireworks spelled out. Nicholas, happy birthday. Did you ask Ms. Yolanda to design this? Nicholas asked. I thought of it myself, Frank said solemnly. Nicholas put his hand on Frank's arm. Thank you, husband. Frank put his arm around Nicholas. Do you like it? Yes. Back at their new house, Nicholas looked around. Where is the gift? It's too big, Frank said. In the living room, a grand piano stood against the wall. Nicholas walked over, touched the keys, and looked back at Frank in shock. How did you know? I guessed, Frank said. I saw you looking at the piano in the store. Nicholas hugged Frank tightly. Thank you. My mother taught piano. I always wanted one. His voice choked up. Thank you. Frank patted his back. Happy birthday, Nicholas. From now on, you will always have me. The following week, Frank faced impeachment at a shareholders meeting because he spent so much time and money on his lover. Mr. Miller has time to set off fireworks, but not to manage the company, a shareholder sneered. Frank spun his chair around. For the next week, I will set off fireworks every day to celebrate my wife's birthday. There is no reason other than I am happy. Any questions? And he did. Every night for a week, they watched fireworks. One night, they went to a small, rundown alley for red bean soup. It was a place Nicholas loved from his high school days. I like all beautiful things, Nicholas said as they walked out. Humorous, elegant, pleasing to the eye. What kind of person do you like? Frank asked, stopping in the shadow of a wall. Tall. Good-looking. Nicholas stammered. Frank stepped closer, trapping Nicholas against the wall. I'm good-looking, tall. Can I think that you like me? Frank kissed him gently. Nicholas, say you like it. I like it, Nicholas whispered, pulled into the kiss. Frank's ears turned red. Mid-May arrived, and they moved into the new house. Frank handed Nicholas a stack of cards. House deed, utilities, pocket money, my salary card. I have my own money, Nicholas protested. The family wants you to worry about it, Frank insisted. Life was pleasant. But one night, Frank tried to invite Nicholas to sleep in the master bedroom. Nicholas refused, citing the expensive bed in the guest room. Frank simply picked him up, quilt and all, and carried him to the master bed. Wife, Frank whispered. I'm tired. Then sleep. I want you. The next morning, Miles burst in, panicked. Charles proposed to me. Did you agree? Nicholas asked, playing the piano. Of course not. I ran away. Just then, Charles stormed in from the terrace door. Miles, open the door. Frank walked in and calmly opened the window. I don't like you. Miles shouted. I don't need you to like me. Charles shouted back. Just marry me. The ring fell under the sofa. The proposal ended in a farce. Later, Frank asked Nicholas, you don't believe in love? I don't, Nicholas said seriously. Feelings can be cultivated, but I don't believe in love. Frank paused. He doesn't believe. Frank learned from Nicholas's old college friend, Jerry, that Nicholas rejected everyone because of his family history. His father abandoned his mother. He doesn't believe in feelings, Jerry said. So when I heard he married you, I was shocked. Frank felt a heavy weight in his chest. One evening, Frank probed. If I confessed to you, would you reject me? Yes, Nicholas said while eating an apple. I don't believe in that kind of sudden love. What if I fall in love with you now? Frank asked, his heart aching. Goodbye, Nicholas said casually. I want a stable relationship, not drama. I would divorce you. Frank felt like he had been stabbed. You would divorce me? Yes. I dislike that. Frank went to the bar and drank alone. I'm lovelorn, he told Charles. Did you get divorced? No. But my wife doesn't want my love. Frank went home drunk. Nicholas cared for him, touching his forehead. You look tired, Nicholas said softly. Frank closed his eyes. He cares, but he doesn't love. For a week, Frank was depressed. He used his brother Marcus's recent breakup as an excuse to mope. I'm sad too, Frank told Nicholas. Just stay with me. He pretended to be sick to get Nicholas's attention. Nicholas fed him porridge, read to him in French, and stayed by his side. Do you like her so much? Frank asked Marcus about the girl who rejected him. Yes. She rejected me, but I still like her, Marcus said firmly. I will become better so she sees me. Frank realized something. Sooner or later, would Nicholas see him? Frank decided to change tactics. He bought French books and gardening tools to share Nicholas's hobbies. I don't like this, Nicholas said, looking at the pile of work. I like to lie down. Okay, Frank said. Then we lied down. He bought a top-tier projector and thousands of movies. I like it. Nicholas hugged him. Husband, you are so kind. Frank felt his soul float. Then came the first anniversary. Frank planned a romantic dinner. He wanted to confess. Frank, I want to discuss something, Nicholas said hesitantly at dinner. Frank panicked. I will never get divorced. Nicholas was stunned. I didn't want a divorce. But the mood was ruined. Frank thought Nicholas was unhappy. The anniversary ended in silence. Frank gave Nicholas a key to a new villa he bought as a gift, but the atmosphere remained cold. Days later, a crisis hit Summit Group. A partner embezzled funds and fled. Creditors came knocking. Frank didn't go home for a week. When he finally returned, he looked exhausted. Divorce, Frank said. It's a fake divorce. To protect your assets. No, Nicholas said firmly. How much is missing? A lot. Please, Nicholas. I won't divorce. If you want a divorce, sue me. Nicholas stormed off. Later, Nicholas came back with a document bag containing his inheritance. Frank refused to take it. Nicholas got angry and slept in the guest room. Frank climbed into the guest bed. Nicholas kicked him. Get out. Frank laughed. Nicholas was angry for him. That meant he cared. The next day, Nicholas showed up at the Summit Group headquarters in a suit, accompanied by a lawyer. He walked into the conference room, where bankers were pressuring Frank. "I am Frank Miller's partner," Nicholas announced. "I own the Sentinel Tower next door. Summit has plenty of assets." He slammed the property deed on the table. "Don't worry. Summit will not collapse." Nicholas walked out. Frank chased him to the elevator. "Wife, get out." Nicholas pushed him. "Honey, I was wrong." Frank pleaded in front of the staff. "Get out." The crisis turned around. But Nicholas gave Frank the cold shoulder for days. Then, Frank had an accident on a construction site during a storm on an island. A scaffold collapsed. Nicholas received the call and rushed to the island. When he arrived at the hospital, Frank was in a cast. Nicholas stood by the bed, his face pale, trembling. He burst into tears. "Scared me to death." Nicholas sobbed. "I'm fine, baby." Frank hugged him. "I'm fine. I was so scared," Nicholas cried. That night, Nicholas refused to leave Frank's side. "I thought, if I couldn't survive," Frank whispered in the quiet ward. "I was afraid you would leave me. I wanted the divorce to protect you because I like you." Nicholas froze. "I like you, Nicholas," Frank confessed. "I love you." Nicholas stared at him, his face turning red. He ran to the bathroom. 2 hours later, driving home, Nicholas slammed on the brakes. "What did you say?" "I said I like you." Back at the apartment, Nicholas refused to let Frank sleep in the guest room. They slept together. The next morning, Frank kissed him. "I love you. I won't hate you," Nicholas whispered. "Come to the company with me," Frank said. Nicholas joined the translation team for a French project. He wanted to experience working with Frank. On a business trip, a French client flirted with Nicholas. "That is my wife," Frank told the client in English. "My wife." On the balcony that night, Frank held Nicholas. "I imagined us meeting as colleagues," Frank said. "And even then, I would fall in love with you. I would notice the boy in the white sweatshirt." Nicholas buried his face in Frank's chest. "I like you," Frank said. "I like you too," Nicholas thought, his heart pounding. Time passed. Frank's leg healed. One day, Nicholas realized he was bored without Frank. He missed him. He realized he was acting just like the love-brained people he used to mock. A stranger who had helped them during the accident told Nicholas, "You care so much because you love your husband." Nicholas realized it was true. On their second anniversary, Frank was away on business. Nicholas prepared a surprise at the hotel. When Frank entered the room, he followed a trail of candles and rose petals to the bathroom. Nicholas was sitting in the bathtub, wearing nothing but a large red bow on his head. "My gift," Nicholas whispered, blushing. Frank smiled, his eyes darkening with desire. "Can I unwrap it?" Later that night, exhausted and breathless, Nicholas hugged Frank's neck. "Frank," he whispered, "I like you." Frank froze. "Say it again." "I like you. Is it the kind of like I understand?" "Yes." "Really? Really?" Frank let out a shout of joy, hugging Nicholas tight, rolling around on the bed like a child. "Nicholas, you like me. I like you." Nicholas laughed, kissing him. From then on, their life changed. They were no longer just partners. They were lovers. "I love you," Nicholas would say every morning. "I love you," Frank would reply. They walked hand in hand through the seasons, two hearts finally beating as one. The salted fish had found his ocean, and Frank had found his home.